Welcome to Soft Recaps. Please be advised, spoilers ahead. Robert McCall, a retired Black Ops government operative, lives in Boston, Massachusetts. He wakes up early each morning and prepares for work. Robert is employed at a home hardware store, where he forms friendships with many of his co-workers. McCall is helping Ralphie lose weight by monitoring his diet, encouraging him to eat healthy food instead of junk, and taking him through vigorous exercises so he can pass the security qualification exams. Living a solitary life, McCall often struggles with insomnia. He spends his late nights reading at an all-night diner, where he befriends a young girl named Terry. He advises her to avoid refined sugar, and they bond over shared stories, including his experiences with fishing. While they are talking, Terry receives a call from her Russian boss, instructing her to meet a waiting customer outside. Terry complies, unhappy, all while Robert watches closely. The following night, during another conversation, Terry reveals to Robert that her real name is Alina and that she dreams of becoming a professional singer. Robert asks about the bruises on her face. We learn that he was once married but is now a widower who spends his time reading books. While walking down the street, Terry's boss, Slavy, suddenly shows up, strikes Alina for allegedly mistreating a customer the previous night, and forces her into a car. Terry defends herself, saying the customer was hitting her first. Before leaving, Slavy hands Robert a business card, telling him to call if he ever needs an escort service. The next night at the cafe, Jake informs Robert that Terry was severely beaten and is now in the ICU at Shawmut Hospital. Robert visits the hospital and watches Terry from a distance. Later, he learns from Terry's friend, Mandy, that Slavy was responsible for Terry's condition after she stood up to a rude customer. After reading the business card, Robert decides to track down Slavy. He enters a restaurant owned by the Russian mob and attempts to negotiate Alina's freedom by offering $9,000. However, Slavy rejects the offer, viewing it as an insult to both himself and his business. Robert pretends to leave, but instead locks the door behind him, turns back, and brutally kills Slavy and 4 of his men using their own weapons, all in just 19 seconds. Later, a private jet arrives in Boston carrying a single passenger named Teddy. Upon landing, he immediately requests to be taken to the crime scene. Teddy carefully reconstructs the entire sequence of events, revealing that Slavy and his men were part of a much larger crime syndicate led by Russian oligarch Vladimir Pushkin. Unbeknownst to Teddy, Robert had already erased all security camera footage before leaving, effectively covering his tracks. In response, Teddy orders the corrupt police officers on his payroll to retrieve surveillance footage from within a 6-block radius. Meanwhile, Robert learns that Ralph has withdrawn his application to become a security guard at Home Mart in order to help his mother run their family restaurant. With help from Boston police detectives, Teddy begins canvassing local rival gangs, eventually beating Irish mob Lieutenant Little John Looney to death to send a brutal message that the Russian mob is back in control. Ralphie later reveals to McCall that corrupt policemen set the restaurant on fire as part of an extortion scheme. While reviewing street camera photographs, Teddy notices Robert appearing in one of the images, identifying him as the potential culprit. That night, the corrupt officers return to extort more money from Ralphie's family while bragging about setting fire to the restaurant. Robert confronts them and demands they return all the money they've collected through extortion. He threatens to expose them by releasing video evidence online if they refuse to comply. Teddy kills Mandy, accusing her of withholding crucial information about Robert, the man he now suspects to be the culprit. Meanwhile, Ralph passes his test and officially becomes a security guard at Home Mart. Teddy later shows his team a photo of Robert entering the restaurant just minutes after Slavy, pointing out that Robert was never seen coming out. While on duty, a gunman robs the hardware store and steals Jenny's ring, a cherished gift from her mother. Later, Robert tracks down the thief, confronts him with a hammer, and retrieves the ring, returning it to Jenny. Teddy visits Robert at his apartment, posing as a detective investigating the homicide. He shows Robert a photo of Mandy's body as a veiled warning before walking away. After conducting a background check, Teddy becomes convinced that everything about McCall is false and fabricated. He sends his men to attack McCall at a restaurant, but McCall manages to subdue them and escape. That same night, Teddy and his team plan an assault on McCall's apartment. only to find it empty. Unbeknownst to them, McCall is in a building across the street, watching their every move through security cameras. Robert visits his fellow retired operatives, Susan and her husband Brian, in Virginia. They help him gather intelligence on Vladimir Pushkin's criminal activities. Susan informs Robert about Pushkin's operations and reveals that Teddy's real name is Nikolai Yatchenko, a former Spetsnaz operative turned Russian secret police agent. She also discloses that Nikolai has murdered 2 Boston police detectives and that another officer, Frank Masters, has been missing from work for several days. McCall captures Frank Masters, a corrupt Boston police officer who has been assisting Teddy, by trapping him in his car and flooding it with carbon monoxide to pressure him into cooperating. Frank eventually gives in and helps McCall infiltrate and dismantle one of Pushkin's money-laundering hideouts in Boston. McCall alerts the police, leading to the arrest of Masters and Pushkin's men. At the scene, they follow a note left by Robert that reads, "Follow the money and discover piles of cash in the hidden stores." Robert then confronts Nikolai once again at the restaurant, warning him that if he continues to pursue him, he will destroy the entire criminal empire in Boston. During their encounter, McCall tells Teddy a story that mirrors his own past, a tale of an ungrateful son who murdered his adoptive parents despite all the good they had done for him. Robert then emails incriminating files about Pushkin's operations to the police, posing as a concerned citizen. He also destroys a container ship used by Pushkin for smuggling goods. Frustrated by Teddy's lack of progress and mounting financial losses, Pushkin gives him an ultimatum: either kill McCall or never return to Moscow. In retaliation, Teddy and his men attack Home Mart, taking Ralph and the other employees hostage. They threaten to kill them in 30 minutes if McCall doesn't show up within 29 minutes. McCall boards a train headed for the store, but unexpectedly avoids the designated meeting point. He enters the store, creating a distraction by playing music over the speakers. He disables most of the lighting and instructs Ralph to lead the hostages to safety. Then, using improvised weapons gathered from the hardware store, McCall eliminates Teddy's men one by one. After a struggle between McCall and one of Teddy's men, Ralph returns to help but is shot in the leg. McCall instructs him to turn the electricity back on exactly 40 seconds later. In the meantime, McCall sets up small containers of propane and oxygen inside a microwave. When the electricity is restored, it triggers the microwave, causing an explosion that kills the last of Teddy's men. McCall then kills Teddy with a nail gun. McCall travels to Moscow, where he eliminates Pushkin's guards and sets up an electrical trap to kill Pushkin himself. He then returns to Boston and reunites with Alina, who has recovered from her injuries and thanks him for giving her a second chance at life. Inspired to continue using his skills to help those in need, McCall posts an online ad identifying himself as the equalizer. He soon receives another plea for help and agrees to take the case. Thanks for watching.